You spend weeks prepping the soil, planting the seeds, and nurturing a new vegetable garden, only to walk out one morning and find your prized harvest covered in aphids or squash bugs. The immediate instinct is to reach for a spray bottle, but hitting your garden with broad-spectrum chemical pesticides sets off a destructive ecological chain reaction. These sprays don't discriminate. They wipe out the invasive pests, but they also kill off the beneficial insects. Once the chemicals wash away, your garden is left as a biological dead zone, completely defenseless when the next wave of invaders arrives. To understand why this happens, look at this diagram comparing a standard garden to a mixed layout. Planting neat rows of identical crops is a practice called monoculture. When you group all your vulnerable plants together, you create a massive, concentrated target. It gives pests an all-you-can-eat buffet and an uninterrupted pathway with no roadblocks. To fix this, we have to rethink how a garden is structured. By introducing specific flowers directly alongside your vegetables, a technique known as companion planting, you can build an active biological defense system. Instead of relying on an endless cycle of spraying, you can use strategic plant diversity to protect your crops from the ground up. The first way flowers protect your vegetables is through a strategy called trap cropping. This involves planting a highly attractive decoy to draw the fire. One of the most effective decoys is the nasturtium. To destructive insects like aphids and caterpillars, the biological makeup of this flower is irresistible. They will actively choose it over almost anything else in your garden. Here is a top-down view of how this works in practice. If you are growing vulnerable crops like cabbage in the center of your bed, you plant a border of nasturtiums around the perimeter. The insects lock on to the decoy flowers, bypassing your harvest and swarming the edges instead. Once those border flowers are heavily infested, you simply pull the entire plant out of the soil and throw it away. You eliminate a concentrated population of pests in one motion. By exploiting the specific feeding preferences of invasive bugs, you break their life cycle easily without needing a single drop of pesticide. If the first strategy is about giving pests a better target, the second is about making your crops disappear entirely. We call this chemical cloaking. Many of the bugs that cause the most damage don't navigate by sight. They find their preferred host plants by locking on to specific chemical odors carried in the wind. Enter the marigold. The foliage and flowers of the marigold emit a dense, pungent scent. When planted near crops like squash or tomatoes, this odor acts as a botanical smokescreen, completely masking the smell of the vegetables. But the marigold's defenses don't just stop at the surface level. It takes this biological fight directly underground. Looking at a cross-section of the garden bed, we can see the marigold roots actively exuding natural compounds into the dirt. Over the course of a growing season, they create a toxic barrier that drives away root knot nematodes, microscopic worms that would otherwise destroy your vegetable roots. Through scent alone, the garden transforms from a highly visible target into an environment that is either invisible or outright hostile to foraging insects. The final line of defense is mercenary recruitment. Instead of hunting down the remaining bugs yourself, you plant specific things to bring in natural predators to do the killing for you. Flowers like cosmos, sweet alyssum, and calendula serve a highly specialized role. Their shallow, open blooms provide easily accessible nectar for beneficial insects. That nectar is the primary food source for predators like hoverflies and syrphid flies. By providing a rich supply of energy, you draw these adults into the garden, landing directly in the middle of your vegetable patch. The payoff happens a few days later. The adult flies will look for a nearby food source for their young, laying their eggs right next to colonies of pests. When those eggs hatch, the resulting larvae are voracious hunters, capable of devouring hundreds of aphids a week. You can even recruit these predators by letting some of your own crops go to seed. Allowing a mature broccoli or onion plant to bolt, meaning it pushes up a stalk and produces its own flowers, creates the exact same nectar habitat. Passive defense will only get you so far. True organic protection means cultivating a space that actively supports your pest's natural enemies. When you combine all three of these strategies, the garden stops functioning as a buffet and starts operating as a defended ecosystem. Decoys draw the initial wave of bugs, chemical smokescreens hide the most vulnerable crops, and recruited mercenaries hunt down whatever gets through. Operating a garden this way requires a shift in how you view success. The goal is no longer to eradicate 100% of the insects on your property. In fact, tolerating a small, manageable pest population is strictly necessary. If you eliminate every single aphid, the hoverflies and syrphid flies will starve and leave. You need a baseline level of prey to keep your predators fed and on patrol. This is exactly why reaching for a broad-spectrum chemical spray is so counterproductive. A single application shatters this delicate biological balance, wiping out the predators you worked so hard to attract and resetting your garden's defenses back to zero. By increasing the diversity of your plants and placing them strategically alongside your vegetables, you stop fighting nature. You weaponize it to protect your harvest year after year.